Tell those followers that I've started a live video, why don't you? You tell them. Y'all might not be used to me with braids. I've had a weird thing going on up here for the last, since we began, I think, this thing. But yeah, had to get them tightened up a little bit. Trying to grow my hair. Sometimes when you grow something, you have to restrain it in order for it to grow in the direction that it needs to grow in. It's kind of like when you put the little stick in the ground or in the pot so that the vine can grow up it. Or the tree, that you want to make sure you're bracing so that it stands up straight and it doesn't lean over this way or lean over that way or eventually break or fall. You got to sometimes restrain things, in order for them to grow straight, or not necessarily straight, but in the way that they should be growing, which in a lot of cases is just growing at all. I don't want to get into the whole thing about hair, but, it's a lot easier to keep your hair in a protective style. It's harder to get it done, but it's easier to have it done, if that makes sense. So, protective styles for the win, right? So we're just letting some people come on into the chat. Let's see what we get. Today on this Freestyle Friday, your host, me, Stuby Kas, will be discussing one of the blog posts that we have on our Life as a Freestyle website that you can go check out, lifeasafreestyle.com. There's a blog. We post all of our Freestyle Fridays, past Freestyle Fridays up onto the site as well. Or at least we post the last live Freestyle Friday onto the site. It's on the homepage. So if you just go to lifeasafreestyle.com, if you missed this Friday or some other Friday, then you can always try to go up there. Maybe within the next 3 days, you'll see the post of last week's or the most recent. And we have our blog posts that we've been putting up there. We try to keep a decent clip of doing it on a regular basis. Obviously, when the spirit hits us and when we, come up with some stuff that is really thoughtful, thought-provoking, we want to make sure that we are constantly digging at this metaphor of life being a freestyle. Life is a freestyle. That metaphor is something that we hold near and dear to our hearts and minds here at least on the Freestyle Friday broadcast, as well as the entire social media network of Life as a Freestyle, which Life as a Freestyle includes Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, our website, and I think we have a Facebook page actually too. So if you look us up, look for our logo. You can see the logo here in our Instagram page. Just look for that logo. When you type in Life as a Freestyle, you got to type that whole thing in. In the case of Twitter, because we didn't have enough words or characters available to us, we had to shorten it up a little bit and call it Life's a Freestyle. No I in the is, right? Yep, no I in the is. What does that mean? Oh man, that's probably bars right there, right? I is two different things. It is what it is. And so far we don't have anybody in the chat. Wow. We are 5 minutes into this and I'm just rambling, scrambling, trying to get people in with the family. Oh, y'all wanted freestyles too. Y'all wanted actual freestyle raps. Some people have been asking for that. Like, are y'all spitting bars or not? What's going on? We spit bars every Freestyle Friday. We just don't spit them in the form of rap because that's not the only way that you can get bars. And that's one of the things that we're trying to show is that metaphor is not just a rap or poetry device, right? Metaphor is something that gets used everywhere, right? So you gotta keep that in mind when you see stuff in the media, when you hear people talk about stuff, random phrases that people have just adhered to their entire lives because they grew up using those phrases and never really questioned them. There's a lot of stuff out there, you know? There's a lot of stuff out there. As a matter of fact, the phrase "a lot" is a metaphor, right? Think about it. What is a lot? A lot is a place where you park cars, maybe, right? A lot is an empty, vacant space. But in order for it to be a lot and not just a small parking spot, that's just one empty parking spot, there has to be a volume that you have to reach, right? So when somebody says a lot, they mean a large open space. Or in this case, if it was a full parking lot, right, like a stadium parking lot, an arena parking lot for some sports event or Olympic event or something like that, that lot is full, right? So a full lot versus an empty lot. I think people maybe don't say a full lot that often, but they definitely don't say an empty lot. So when people say that there's a lot of something, they usually mean that it's a full lot of the thing that is, in this case, it'd be cars in a parking space. But like, you know, it could be a lot of ducks. There's a lot of ducks here, a whole lot of ducks. And it's like, there's not a lot of ducks because there's not duck slots, you know, for ducks to fit into, and all of them are not in the duck slots. And you know, so metaphor, but it's a metaphor. It's a visualization of like how big something is. It's scope, it's scale, right? It's just the idea of like what it is that I'm trying to communicate when I say a lot. I could say many, I could say a multitude of, right? Depending on what it is I'm talking about, but we got to remember to think beyond the ways that we are on program to think, right? So we got educated on a particular program here in the United States, probably also abroad. Every country has their own kind of national educational system, right? And it's all different everywhere you go. There are some overlaps, of course, but you know, I haven't been outside of the United States personally. I mean, technically I have been, but like technically I haven't. You know what I mean? Like Canada doesn't really count. No offense to Canadians, but I was just at Niagara Falls. That doesn't really count because you can see the United States from across the river, right? So it doesn't count. Yeah, but or across the falls. I guess it's a river that leads to falls. I don't know, whatever. But I'm just waiting for people to come in at this point. I'm just chopping it up with myself. This is going to be saved for perpetuity so that y'all see that I'm just sitting here for 10 minutes waiting for somebody to jump in when this was what we all agreed to do. Yep. So I want to get to reading this blog post that one of our fellows here at Life is a Freestyle has put out. I posted it in the Instagram stories earlier. At least not the whole story, not the whole post, but just like the first paragraph, just to get you guys and gals kind of up to date on what it is that we'll be talking about this week. We don't have anybody else but me, so seeing that there's nobody else in the chat says a lot about how much draw I have individually. But I didn't post in my own account either, so I can't even be tripping. Like I don't have my followers here because I'm just really bad at PR and marketing, as you can see. Nobody's there. Echo, 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 echo. Yeah. I think, let's see if I can, I'm going to give it about 5 more minutes. And if nobody shows up, then I'm out. But it's Friday, you know. A lot of people are celebrating Friday. A lot of people are in the trenches still, you know. Being safe in the midst of coronavirus, being safe in the midst of idiocy that's running rampant all over the world. Because that's just as much of a virus, to be honest with you. If you could see the way that people are reacting to this virus and the way that a prudent society would act towards a virus. Now, of course, you know, the very specifics on what is prudent probably differ from nation to nation because, again, as I mentioned before, every nation has their own educational system. So what's important, the values that are placed into the educational system are going to determine what people value in terms of life, what people value in terms of rigidity or freestyle, right? Like if freestyle was taught in schools, right, on a regular basis, like from the beginning, or at least for the last, let's say, 30, 40 years, if freestyle was taught in school, you know, for as long as hip hop has existed, if hip hop was actually integrated into the school system in a way where there could be a sensibility about what the tenets of hip hop are actually doing, the linguistics and the metaphor and you know, all these kind of sounds and senses that are involved, then perhaps people would think differently. But right now, a lot of people just are thinking very basically, and basic is fine, but it's not all there is, right? Everything is not just basic. Some things have a lot of layers and nuance to them. And I love to use the word nuance, but I think we need to discover the extra layers of meaning that exist, whether we like it or not. They exist, and they can be utilized. And when they're not being utilized, it doesn't mean that those extra layers could not be interpreted. It just means that the authorial intent behind how it was being said by the person who said it or did it or whatever may not have been utilized to the extent that it could have been, right? So it's like when you are a rapper and you discover that something that you said in a rap that you wrote and performed and recorded was considered bars, but you didn't even understand that extra entendre, that extra level of depth that you actually put into the thing until you go back and listen to it, or until you go back and hear it 100th time or whatever, or somebody else brings it up to you and it's just like, oh, so is that what you meant when you said that? And it's like, nah, but now that you mention it, it goes, right? So those levels and those layers are important. And I think if people were inspired more to think about not only what they say, but what they understand, in the same way that rappers are kind of put in a situation in which, like, not only do they have to be careful about what they say because they want to make sure that their message is getting across, but they can also get that feedback loop of, this is what it sounded like you said, this is what I got from it. And then by virtue of hearing that feedback, you're actually like, oh, I never thought about it like that. You interpreted it that way. I didn't mean it that way. But now that I see that it can be interpreted that way, maybe I should think about how I'm using my words. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that we learn in SOSA, Society of Spoken Art. Shout out to Lupe Fiasco IT and all of the ITs, Master ITs, Journeyman ITs, Grandmaster ITs, Master ITs, Journeyman ITs, Apprentice ITs, and that's me. And friends, of course, friends of SOSA as well. Everybody who actually cares about metaphor, everybody who actually cares about linguistics, to the point where what's being used and utilized is not only valuable for the person who's interpreting it, but can be utilized as an educational structure to teach how language and communication actually work. So here we are. It's 5:15. We're live. We're live. But nobody's here. The lights are on, but nobody's home. So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining. Everybody that joined, thank you for joining. Everybody that watches this later, I hope you got something out of that a little bit. I'm not going to go into the whole blog post and you know, diatribe and stuff, because like the whole point of this was to see if I could get other people to come in that, you know, either had been asking to come in previously because we had guests and they wanted to be able to pop in or what have you, or people who watch this later and just appreciate this for what it is. You know, we could do the whole hour-long thing, but I'm going to save you some time, and I'm going to save myself some time, and I'm just going to call this one, and we will come back next week. We have a very special guest, Dr. Fox Harrell, an MIT professor that studies language, linguistics, culture, design, and a lot of things like that. We'll get into more details over the course of the next week. But yeah, y'all make sure to tune in to our channel on Instagram, to our channel on Twitter. Give us feedback for things that you see that you like. Comment on our posts. Let us know how you feel about all the stuff that we're doing. Obviously, if this is on YouTube, like and subscribe, please. That definitely helps us. But of course, conversation is the most important thing. So, all the like and subscribe stuff that you hear from people that do YouTube videos. This isn't even a YouTube video. This is an Instagram Live. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I was on here with people, we'd be talking, and that'd be the conversation, and that'd be where the value's at. But we'll just keep the conversation in text form for now, and within your minds as you kind of navigate into the future with some of these ideas that we have brought up on our past Freestyle Fridays and within our Life is a Freestyle blog as well. You can go there to see all of the stuff that we've written so far. A lot of ideas and thoughts about the metaphor, but also how it applies to today, how it applies to the artist's mind, the creative's mind, the pragmatic mind, and things like that. So, feel free to jump in and comment on those posts. Feel free to share them with people who you think are like word nerds, or people who really care about linguistics, or who care about like intellectual discourse and stuff like that. And yeah, that's all I got. This is Stuby Kas, soon to be known All-Star. And I appreciate y'all for watching. If you made it this far, you are the champion of the day. And now that Greg IT has jumped on, oh boy, I was literally just getting off of this thing. So I'm going to have to bring you in, bro. I'm going to have to bring you in. I was literally signing off after 16, 17 minutes. So come on through and chop it up with me since you're here, so we can give people a little bit more content than what I was able to give them. Yeah, it's just me and you right now. It's literally just me and you. And as soon as you jump in, it's going to be some folks that follow you that are going to jump in. So let's go. Got Larice Love in the building as well. See, this is support. That's what you call support.
Yo!
Support at the last minute. Yo, man, I was literally like, this has been Stuby Kas, I'm out, and then you come in. So it's just like...
It ain't over, you know what I mean?
Nah, it's not over. Okay, all right. Y'all gonna make me work some overtime. It's all good. It's all good.
All good. It's all good. What you got planned? You know what I mean? It's quarantine. You see what I'm saying?
Man, listen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm liking the braids, bro. That shit look fly.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Shout to Queen Joe Hair Salon over on La Brea Avenue in LA.
Word.
Check her out.
Sir, man. Yeah. What you been on, man? How's your day been?
Man, I'm doing all right. You know what I'm saying? I made sure to get some sunlight today.
I feel that.
For the most part, I just been looking through Twitter and reading what's going on lately with the world. It's a lot of people who are hurting right now. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's tragic that this time is causing so much pain that's unnecessary. Like, not only is COVID killing people,
right,
and not only are police being overly, I guess, zealous about their approach to policing, and not only are governors and people in the government being tone deaf about how they're managing all of this, but we have a lot of discourse going on in places like Twitter and Instagram that are causing a lot of hurt feelings, because, you know what I'm saying, like, it's people are being very, not only disingenuous in a lot of cases, but also very intentionally hurtful, I think, is what you see a lot of times, you know?
Yeah, well,
And
I mean, you find yourself in a place, especially, and we're definitely going to get to your question, by the way. But it's one of those things where I find that when you have this level of this influx of information, right? When you're having this platform at which all voices have the same level of resonance, right? So you have the people who are, you know, we see this in the, do we wear masks? Do we not? Do we wear masks? Do we not? Do I spritz sanitizer in my mouth? Do I put it in my hair? Do I put it?
do I drink bleach? Do I drink bleach? Tell me, just tell me.
Do I add kale? Do I have the hand sanitizer, kale smoothie? It's like one of those things where it's like you find yourself in this place where there are so many people whom feel as though, you know, with the right caption, you know, with the right title sequence, you know, when they put themselves in a situation where, you know, they're reading a certain article and that article has that 48 laws of power, you know, less is more when it comes to the title punch to it, you know, that they think it's law, right? And so let's say I'm a professional in a certain field, right? And I want to give my well-informed, well-researched take on a certain instance, right? And then I find myself in a position where, because of the immediacy and the adrenaline that comes with being, let's say, the first comment or the first comment underneath my well-informed opinion, and that, depending upon the context of that comment, can take over in a tidal wave. And I think that really weaves back into like a certain context of maybe some of Ye's tweets, where you find that he's doing the thing that he knows ultimately is going to create that level of shock value, because this man is incredibly intelligent. And I think a lot of people don't understand that music, and when you're thinking of the context of music or storytelling, or we're in the business of this etymology bag, right? So when it comes to spelling things out, casting these spells and putting people under a certain level of influence, right?
Yeah.
When I say something that's very small and punchy, it's going to have this visceral effect where you're like, wait, I think that's incorrect for whatever reason, or I think that's for whatever reason, you know, and it just stirs the pot. And some people, like, you know, for him or for other people whom benefit off of the attention, right? Because a lot of people might be like, yeah, you're wrong. But there's that small fraction of people who are like, I'm gonna go cop these $200 Yeezys, and that's the people that you know, those are the people who are keeping the lights on, you know. So in a way,
and the other part about that though is that, you know, there's people in the middle, and I consider myself one of those people in the middle where I'm not just gonna immediately dismiss Ye as crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna immediately just go buy all of his stuff out of fandom.
Sure.
I'm kind of in the middle where I like to look at what's actually, and again, we are, you know, semiotician juniors. You know, we may not necessarily be academically accredited or anything like that, but we definitely are looking at things in terms of how the words are constructed and also the context in which the words are actually being put out there. So a lot of times, looking at the feedback mechanisms only, just looking at the negative space in between the things that are said by celebrities and politicians and all the actions that are made, looking at all of the murmur is actually way more insightful than listening to specifically what it is that's being said that causes the uproar, right? When you look at the uproar itself, it's actually indicative of the sensibilities of the people as well as their understanding of the context of the situation. And a lot of times, there is absolutely no understanding of context, because when you have a knee-jerk reaction, it's because you don't have enough context. That's the only reason people have knee-jerk reactions, in my personal opinion.
Right. And I think, you know, to really build off of that, because I think that's an incredible point. And by the way, everyone who's popping in, we appreciate you popping in, you know what I mean, to this Freestyle Friday where...
What's up, Joe Kiss Santos?
Yeah, where there's no finite guess, you know what I mean? But if y'all feel like you want to add to the conversation, you have random questions about things that you've seen throughout the internet, miscellaneous takes. We can just cover, you know, whatever. This is a freestyle in purest form. You know what I mean? So we're just gonna go ahead and run through it. So for the most part, I think that builds very well into the concept of, you know, two separate circles, right? And I find myself in a place where when I look at situations, especially situations where there is this, you know, binary take, right? It's a 0 or 1. There's a left or a right. It's a red or a blue. It's a right or a wrong. So there's all these different things where it's like, hey, choose a side. Otherwise, you know, you're ultimately
Or else. Yeah.
right, or else, right? If else statements. That's crazy. See, you rap.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you know, you think you can slide, you know, some shit past. You feel me? You think you can slide some shit past? Y'all do this. But for the most part, I find myself in this place where there's two separate circles, right? And you have the outer circle, right? And the outer circle of people are the ones who are passionately affected by the instance, right? So you take an example of an issue, right? You take an example of, let's say, in recent history, in current history, actually, you have people still protesting, right, over for what they feel as though should be actionable change, right? So you find yourself in a place where we're all passionately affected in some way. We're all passionately affected, well, in many ways. And so the thing is that with everyone being affected, being the larger mass, you have this smaller circle within, right? And the circle within are those whom are affected, but are taking a rational translation of that passion and transmuting it into action, right? Into action, right?
Yeah.
So that means that those who are outside of the inner circle of those people, their goal really, or their goal is to, or where they sit is more of the reactionary knee-jerk folks, right? The ones who know exactly how to articulate what they're saying. It might be like, I'm just gonna repost this thing and I'm gonna go back to watching Narcos. I'm gonna do the thing, right? But I'm not gonna put myself in a position where I'm taking action. And you'll find that initially when these knee-jerk things occur, right? When we hear these statements, when we see these takes, when we see these headlines, we find ourselves in this place where that displacement of the inner ring of rational folks, the rational and passionate folks, right? And then just the pure, raw passion, knee-jerk folks is a very high displacement. You might have a 30%, 70%, you know? And then the real motive and the real directive of that inner ring of people is to try to expand that ring and up the percentage of, hey, we're going to take you. I like your passion. I see what you're doing with it, but you're not doing shit. So let's take you. Let's pull you over here. Let's take you. Let's pull you over here so we can increase this inner ring percentage.
Right.
And build.
But the hard part about that is that the lower the percentage that you start off with in that inner circle, the harder it is to convince that outer circle, because the outer circle is operating off of groupthink and herd mentality and, you know, FOMO and the desire to kind of fit into a community that we don't really always talk about, but we always express in certain ways. So it's even, you know, in hip hop communities around the world, you have people who are not neighbors. And just the mentality of, I'm going to be inclusive of the people who share my passion for something, but I'm not going to be inclusive of the people right next to me, I think is a very interesting dichotomy that happens in hip hop, but it happens really as human interaction across all kind of, you know, extremes. And so I think that the people who are in the know, there's almost a certain level of power that they don't want to always give up. And in some cases they want to give it up, but there's power in numbers. And so you have that larger outer circle, which has, let's say, 95% of the people as opposed to like 70 or something like that. And that 95% feels way more comfortable being a part of 95% of people than it does being a part of the 5 or 6 or 7 or 8% of that center circle.
Sure. And I feel like, you know, to kind of almost crack even my last example, it's like interesting how the inner circle of passion affected is really the fringe, right? But at the same time, metaphorically, they're still at the core of it. So if we think of like a globe, we're still talking about a magnet, right? People are still going to naturally slide into and slide towards the rational part of it, but you're going to have people who are going to splinter off and ultimately not be a part of those people passionately affected, because some people who cared last month don't care now. I mean, that's just honest, assessment of, like, some people were like, oh, it was a big thing then, or companies were like, hey, this is a great way to monetize in the moment, but now it's more of like campaign strategies and marketing strategies and advertisement strategies.
Back to politics as usual.
Right. They change every month, and that's that's to say, everyone has different practices. I can't knock people who weren't about it to begin with. You know what I mean? So it's like
Well, we weren't taught to be about revolution in this country, at least. We weren't really, we're taught about the Revolutionary War. We're taught about the Civil War. We're taught about wars, but we're not really taught about liberation and what that actually looks like and what that means and where it comes from and why there's a need for it in the first place. I think we have Hollywood for that, unfortunately, and fortunately at the same time, because they provide images, they provide frames of reference for Star Wars or something to that effect, where the Empire is this thing, and all these kind of cartoon villains that they have who just want to do this with their hands and stroke their cat and be like, oh, like, one day I'm gonna get you, and that's supposed to be some abstraction of the idea that we are actually under the power of those who actually do not have us for their best interest. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Or our best interest in mind.
Yeah, and I think there's really no way to avoid certain things. I mean, I was literally going back through the archives of videos that I watched in the recent past, and I think it was 2 days ago, I was just going back over the Snowden and Rogan podcast segments, and it was like just about the privacy of things. And so I find that we are naturally at the agency, whether it's under our control or not. I mean, there's things that ultimately have sustained themselves and have put themselves in positions where it's almost like a law of gravity. You come in, and if you accept these terms and conditions, right, and you put yourself in this certain circumstance where you approve people to have certain access to your mind, right? Then at that point, once you let them in, there's really no way to get them out. It's like a surgical procedure, right?
But let me ask you this: do you think people actually believe that they are granting people access to their mind, though? Like, do you think?
I mean, the majority of where we get this access from, and the majority of where we get a lot of these penetrations from these different forces from, it's because it's masked in something that looks great. You're telling me that I can have this amazing feature, right? Like, for instance, we'll weave it back into music, right? I'm telling you, or I'm artist A, right, who has X resonance, and I'm telling you to go over there, wig this dude, smash that dude's woman, do this, do that, which to each their own, but I'm gonna mask this message in a very, very alluring 808 beat. I'm gonna mask this video in a very alluring, here's this very gorgeous model who we all know looks amazing, who is distracting you from ultimately the thing that I know is a very safe topic to talk about, but at the same time, something that could otherwise be damaging. It's always gonna be wrapped in this, hey guys, we have emojis. But how many times taking pictures of your face at different angles every time you unlock your phone? So
and there's a point at which you could become hyper paranoid because there are things that can be thought of that can't necessarily be implemented as easily or legally, at least right away. But the fact that we can conceptualize that there are these cartoon villain enemies at the tops of these corporations who are planning to do these things or selling this information for very nefarious reasons, or that the people who they're selling them to are going to take them and use them against us, and it's part of the state and all this other stuff. Like, I want to touch on what Altagracia Alvarado says. Overconsumption of amazing things still creates sickness. And that's a bar, because it's like, you know, we could create beautiful things. We could create all this technology, all these platforms, all these opportunities for people to express themselves, expand their understanding, the internet, you know what I'm saying? But even though that is a very beautiful and complex thing, it still is breeding. It's like, what I've noticed is this, and to get to Larice Love's point about what we think about Ye's tweets, beyond what he's tweeting about and beyond the responses that people have, you start to see this kind of behavioral pattern emerge. And this has maybe always been around on Twitter for sure, but I'm seeing, because I don't really be on Twitter like that much, but sometimes I'm getting into it a little bit more deeply. What's up, ladies? AIT, Maven IT join in. Fupa Luca also joined earlier. I just want to make sure everybody's being acknowledged, because we ain't got that many people. So,
you know what I mean? Listen,
but I want to,
everything gonna come around full circle
eventually. So what I've noticed is that, Twitter has this kind of behavioral pattern where somebody with clout, somebody with, uncontested amounts of clout, right? Kanye, right? Donald Trump. Now, why these people have clout is a different conversation. We don't got to get into that. But people with uncontested amounts of clout can say something incendiary, inflammatory, abrasive, seemingly mentally unstable, right? And not only do you have the people who are there to kind of white knight or swoop in and like be on the side of that person just because of the loyalty, you also have the people who are like, rah, I don't like what you said, that's horrible, you are a horrible person, I'm going to cancel you. And then you have the trolls. This is the trolls field day, because the trolls don't even care about Kanye. They don't even care about Trump. They don't care about any one of the celebrities or anybody that has anything to say with clout. They just care about being able to piggyback and essentially be a leech to that person's coattails, to that person's following, to that person's presence and exposure to the world. So you have these people who are making jokes. That's one of the things that they're doing. Another type of person is a person who's trying to sell their products. Like, hey, I'm going to put a bunch of Kanye type drawings up or Trump type drawings up or somebody type drawings and say, hey, I can make your logo for a certain fee. Come holler at me. And it's just like, to me, that segment of people is the most dangerous segment of people, because what they're doing is they're just throwing trash into the street as we try to figure out. It's the equivalent of the people who are, the guy who smashed all the windows in the AutoZone in the Minnesota protests. It's like that. It means nothing. It does nothing for anybody. But now we have to address this, because this doesn't even have to be here, and it's a distraction. And now we have to talk about that it's a distraction, and that's a distraction in and of itself. And now we never get to the core issue of what the original tweet or what the original conversation is even about. And we can't even discuss it on a deeper level than the knee-jerk reaction, like the 5% of people or that 30% or that tiny minority of people who actually are willing to look at it from different contexts. They're not actually going to get a chance to get a word in edgewise, because you got these people from outside of the circle who are just lobbing in these Molotov cocktails and setting stuff on fire and turning over cars and who knows what's going on. So like, we never have a chance to actually have serious intellectual or cognitive or behavioral or historical or contextual discussions about why the person who is incendiary is even incendiary in the first place. What got them to that point?
I like
who's around them,
Yeah, I would 100% agree, because I liken that to, I'll draw an environmental metaphor where you'll find that, there's going to be those to build off your incendiary term, right? So I find that when it comes to those whom you always have circumstances where a natural fire can occur, right? Now, when you have the elements and you have the ingredients to start a fire, and a fire is ignited, it could immediately be snuffed by, you know, a pocket of dirt. It could be snuffed by a bush that's too big for it to, you know, that's too big for it to burn and continue to burn, right? But then there's this element and there's this component that's always going to be there. That's really the uncontrollable, or really the kind of wild card in a lot of the circumstances. We got people in here, great folks. You'll find that there's this element, right? That's something something of a wild card in these scenarios, right? And that is the trolls. The trolls are going to be the wind, right? Because the wind can come in, and this is where the brush fire occurs. And there's nothing really, right? Once we understand, and once it's understood, which I know that there's a certain majority, and granted, it's the fringe majority, right, whom we don't understand why the wind does what it does, but it does what it does, right? And so it's ultimately where we're in a position where we can focus on trying to control the uncontrollable, or is it really the weakness of our ability to recover regardless of whatever way the wind blows this fire? It's saying, hey, we have people in this direction cardinally. We're prepared on all sides to be able to say, there's all this misinformation. There's all ambiguation. There's all this distraction, right? There's all of this people whom are doing these incendiary things, right? For their own purposes, right? For their own perspectives, for their own scopes. And I can understand how, you know, with everyone else's, you know, focus and with everyone else's intent, that most people won't understand, you know, why these things consistently persist. But with more wind, once people realize their small fires that they start can pick up fairly easily, that doesn't encourage those folks to stop. So here we are, right? It's 2020, and we're in the land of nothing but dumpster fires everywhere, right?
Man, listen.
So instead of focusing on the cause, right, which is something that I think a lot of people try to, you know, put a lot of their energy and attention into, is focusing on the cause of certain issues and focusing on the cause of, man, how do we prevent that thing, so when that thing pops up again, we know what to. And it's like, look, at the end of the day, it's going to happen again, regardless if you notice it or you don't.
I don't necessarily agree with that, though. I feel like,
I think at least preventative. First, it's there is a level of preventative maintenance, because I see where you're going, because there's preventative maintenance for sure. But the thing is that with the fractured recovery system, the fires aren't even getting put out to the point where we can even consider the
Well, some of us have the luxury of being able to. Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. And I agree with you. I just feel like there's an extra layer of, some of us have the ability to actually, we have the privilege to be able to like continue to live our lives somewhat uninterrupted. You know, we obviously can't be out in the world and rocking the stages and doing all kinds of stuff like that, but we have the privilege to not be dying right now. You know what I mean? And I think that
COVID that weren't making it before, and now that there's all sorts of things going on. I mean, trade routes being blocked, people are dying from famine. I mean, it's like, don't worry about where your next meal comes from. People don't understand.
Yeah. And it's real out there. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that I feel like, you know, those of us who actually do, and there might be more of us that are actually not being affected by this than there are, though, at least in certain regions, than there are people who are being severely or even like mortally affected by this. So what I want to say about that is that discussing what our options are, or I should say, being prepared, learning what preparation is in this moment, because we are behind in preparation. So how do you make up the preparation that you lacked prior to this thing hitting. Now, whatever that thing is, it could be the pandemic, it could be something else later, it could be this election cycle, it could be whatever. But how do you make up for the lack of preparation? You got to do something to respond and react to the lack of preparation. So you can, compensate eventually by overworking in a certain area, or focusing on a certain area, or having a task force for a certain area. But I think those of us who maybe can't be on a task force should really be looking at the historical context of this, and then learning the preparation that will allow us to nip this in the bud, so that we can start to socialize the ideas of what are the possibilities of us getting out of this. Because while the task force is coming up with the actual ultimate goal, or the actual ultimate execution, we still are human beings, and we still have essentially all the same needs and requirements of, shelter, food, safety, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that we have to get to a point where we look at our common needs as a human race, and we say, okay, we all know that we need these things, and we know that everybody doesn't have them, and we have to understand why everybody doesn't have them. And then we have to understand how to get those things to them without killing other people, without making it worse for other people. Can we do that? Can we have that conversation? And I think that conversation starts in the mind. It starts in discourse. It starts on social media, because as long as you have all these people who, once somebody like Kanye says something, everybody drops what they're doing to either rush to the fire and add gasoline to it, or to try to put it out. And you kind of have these billowings of like fire and CO2 and, all this stuff happening, and you don't know what's going to happen until the dust settles. That's not going to help. What we should do is we should let the thing be said. Have a discussion about why what was said is important, not why it was wrong or right, because I think that's where we get lost, is that binary thing that you were talking about before of trying to be right or wrong, trying to be left or right, trying to be up or down, or progressive or regressive, or whatever it is, black and white. So I feel like once we get to a point where we can sit back at something that is done or said, and we can look at it calmly and intellectually and say, okay, for instance, in the case of Kanye's tweet, I don't know which one it was today because it's always one of them, but they keep piling on top of each other.
I don't really keep up.
What he said today was something to the effect of, so he says over 22.5 million black babies have been aborted over the past 50 years. Now, if that's a fact, I don't know, because I haven't gone and done the research that he apparently did. If that is true, it's true, regardless of what that means and what he's trying to say about it and all this other stuff. The conversation that's being had is not even in the realm of, what can we, is it a bad thing that this has happened, or is it a good thing? Or is it something that's neither bad nor good? And if it is something that's neither bad nor good because it's circumstantial and it's on an individual basis, let's not have that conversation about good and bad, because it's not going to be it's fruitful for anybody. Because in some cases you need it, in some cases you don't. In some cases it's a health concern, in some cases it's a lifestyle concern.
Right.
It's a lot of different things, but we can't just assume that it's something that is, bad or good because of how we feel about Kanye right now, or how we feel about his mental health, or how we feel about whatever political affiliations he might have, or how we feel about him being a black man in America, or how we feel about Twitter being used as a platform to say this type of stuff. There's all these different things that we have to remove from what was actually said, because what ends up happening is 100 years from now, 50 years from now, 20 years from now, when people are looking at these quotes, they're not going to have any of the context as to what's going on. And if we're looking at that like there's no context, we're just reading quotes and we're knee-jerking off of that the way people would if they read a quote by some, slave owner from the 1700s.
Or a poet that a lot of people, respect.
Or a poet. Exactly, right? There's a lot of quotes from poets and a lot of quotes from like literary scholars and stuff like that. Even, proverbs, Chinese proverbs, African proverbs, proverbs from the Bible, all these different things that have been said, and they can get taken out of context just as much as anything else can get taken out of context, and they can get used for the well-being or for the agenda of whoever wants to use it for whatever reasons, if they know how to flip those words. And it's important that we stop allowing people to flip the words for you and pull your agency away from your ability to understand what's actually being said. Because if people are feeding you this kind of dogma of how it is that you're supposed to interpret something, then when the thing is said and it's not said with that intent, with that authorial intent, you're only going to read it with the authorial intent that has been put in your head, and not what has been said by the person who may not necessarily adhere to those authorial intentions that were put into your head.
Yeah, because I mean, and what seems to me to be the overarching, concept of weaving into what Maven IT is mentioning, is when we have the freedom of action and the freedom of agency, we're put in a different kind of position, right? Because then at that point, we open the floor to be able to understand and to be able to start unpacking what it really means to communicate freely, right? And so the only thing is that when you're considering perspective, the idea of free communication, right, becomes this very misty, very kind of hazy thing where you have people who have no problem saying incendiary, drive-through, microwave kind of things, knowing that they're stoking the flame for a certain reaction, and those people of their own agency are openly communicating, right, with some sort of purpose or with some sort of authorial intention going into it, right? Whereas you also have people whom are just out here who just want to live their own fucking life, right? People who just want to say, hey, I want to be able to make my own decision, kind of when I want to make that decision. And I would hope that, as long as I'm not disrupting people around and putting myself in a position where I'm hurting somebody else, and, ideally I would like to do this thing. But it's this idea of, some people, regardless of whether or not they want to contextualize it as this or they don't want to contextualize it as this, some people honestly think that certain minds don't have the capacity or the responsibility or the discipline to make their own decisions. So, and it's proven because some folks are just out here just doing wild shit, right?
Some people delegate their responsibility to elected officials.
Sure.
And it's not always government. Sometimes the elected officials are celebrities, and they're elected by virtue of the person who adheres to whatever it is that person says.
That's a huge concept. You find yourself in this place where that's 100% correct. We find people in a position where, because of their accolades, because of their ideas, because of their concepts, because maybe we connect with how they communicate to us, right? We celebrate these people. They become celebrities, right? So these recipients of this celebration. And so once this pedestal is established, then we find ourselves in a position where their voice has a resonance to a higher tier than what I guess you could say the general population, right? And we look to these people to have this higher vantage point and this higher understanding of all topics, right?
But here's the and I think maybe we have 5 minutes left, so I want to definitely cap it right here. But I want to say this, and we can go back and forth a little bit as well. But
by the way, I appreciate everybody who's dropping in here and giving their
definitely
and weighing in on this Freestyle Friday. We do this every single Friday. Most of the time it's with a guest. This week we decided to not go with a guest, be able to hop on here, be able to relay some comments, some ideas, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Vibe with y'all a little bit more than usual.
100%. Anyway, my brother, go ahead.
No, it's all good. So I was just gonna say that I feel like we probably as a society have to develop a stronger sense of personal accountability, as opposed to that delegation of responsibility. Because once somebody And the other part of it, and the biggest part of it to me, is once somebody ascends to a certain level of fame and fortune and celebrity and what have you and power, we assume that where they are is not affected by this negative power structure that is controlling the rest of the world. When in fact, the higher you may get, and I don't know from personal experience, but I mean, I'm looking at the way that our celebrities and our unelected officials are actually out there representing us, and it seems like there's a lot of tumultuousness or tumult that's involved in being of that amount of monetary or social or, you know, whatever kind of power, to the point where we can't really assume that that person is not being controlled, that that person is not going to get in trouble by a higher order than the police or the government if they say some stuff that's going to maybe poke the people in a certain direction.
Step out of line. Don't step out of line.
So because of that, we can't be sure that all of the celebrities and the people that we look up to are even like of their own volition. You know, a lot of the messages that they may have may be messages that have been given to them to project. And so just be careful with who you follow and who you delegate your power to, because you have to have your own power. It's not about somebody else giving you power or nothing like that. You have to be yourself, because that is the ultimate power. And that's just my last statement on that.
Right. Right. I mean,
yeah.
that's really the crux of, that's really the crux of being able to freestyle your way successfully through this world, is to be able to take something in, understanding that there's variables at hand, right? Understanding there's no such thing as no constraints. There's no such thing as no barriers. You either have, life is peaks and valleys. You either have to go down and mind your balance or you'll slip, or go up and mind your balance because you'll slip. So we find ourselves in these places where
you got to be a goat,
where a decision has to be made, right? And
you got to be a mountain goat.
You have to be a mountain goat. You feel?
We're going to post a mountain goat on our profile to show y'all what we talking about. You got to be a mountain goat and you cannot slip.
Yeah. There's no, you have to have sure footing in this lifetime, and you have to have sure footing with your thoughts as well. You have to have sure footing with not only your thoughts, but with your actions, most importantly, because we find ourselves in a place where we're so susceptible. Back to the point of, there's a lot of drive-through information. There's a lot of microwave information. A lot of people don't sit down and think about, how do I feel about this thing? Let me give it 24 hours. Let me give it 48 hours.
Right.
It needs to be an immediate take. And the thing about it is that with an immediate take, without understanding all the dimensions and all the levels and all the understanding, we're always going to be in a position where in a freestyle we could choke up, right?
Choke up.
Flip up, but to create that beautiful, elegant flow that everyone reveres and adores and loves so much, the only way to do that is to just
osmosis.
Yeah, take it in, listen, be patient, understand where you are in life, and understand that you really have the power to be able to maneuver through this life, but you have to slow down, So that's one of the lessons that I'm still teaching myself. That's still, By the way, I appreciate this conversation, bro. And I hope everybody in the chat has an amazing day and is taking some value from this. And, I'll catch y'all on the other side.
Yeah. So with that being said, I know we have like 30 seconds or something like that left. I just want to say thanks, Greg IT, for coming through.
Of course.
gregNWMN for coming through, right? And thank you everybody for coming in at the last second. But y'all came through and I appreciate it. And check the beginning of this live when I post this on YouTube, so you can see what I was talking about, because I was just jaw jacking before everybody jumped in. But anyway, go check out our website, lifeisafreestyle.com. We have a blog post that talks about being on rails or being kind of a diffuse style, right? So there's this idea of thinking in a way that needs to be done the way that it always needs to be done, or thinking in a way that allows you some flexibility and stuff like that. So just remember to try to think flexibly and wear a mask, be safe, don't get COVID,
Easy.
and come out of this with something that you didn't have when you went in a positive way. And
Sure.
with that, we out. Peace, y'all.
Yeah. Peace.